Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. In this video, we'll be creating a landscape environment with a lighthouse on a seaside. And as usual, stay tuned because along the way, I will show you the main steps I used to create this image. My name is Victor, I'm an illustrator and concept artist working for film and games. I really hope you guys will enjoy this video and find it helpful. Alright, let's start. Usually there are a couple of ways I start these concept sketches. I either block my composition straight with Linework, like a very simple rough sketch, or I use thumbnail composition sketches in black and white with wider brush strokes to kind of generate an idea, sort of like pinpoint the lighting and see if it works. And I think I recommend usually to do both. It's also gonna help you generate more ideas and kind of get accustomed with creating this really cool smaller compositions that later on you might develop into more polished finished paintings. And right now, after you're okay with your sketch, after you're thinking that the composition is working, you roughly placed everything where it has to be, you can proceed and block in the flat color. As you can see me doing right now, I'm already hinting some idea of lighting over there in the background with the sky. And for now I'm just working flat color. I'm not worried about the form too much. I'm just pushing the values here and there, trying to figure out if everything works together because, you know, especially value and color, they all work in relation to each other. Planning ahead and seeing if all these nuances will work and kind of trying to hint already at some light source. So in this case you can see that I'm sort of planning to have the main direct light come from the right over there, and already sort of like kind of building that form up a little bit. And now you can see that I was also planning, I didn't quite show it in the sketch, but I was already planning it to have like these waves crashing on the rocks over there and create like this sort of like an interesting shape. Contrasting with the lighthouse. And you don't want to have it like boring, so that's why instead of leaving the way it was, I use the transform tool to sort of give it like an inclination, make it a little bit more directional. This way it's helping the composition be a little bit more dynamic. And I'm gonna constantly return, putting some brush strokes here and there, and then I'm moving to the rest of the image, and then I'm coming back to the focal point and so on. It's kind of like a process where you don't want to stay too long in one spot because you want to have consistent detail overall in all the paintings. And right now I'm trying to add a bit of detailing to the ground. So I was trying to create a pattern here, just a textural pattern to quickly give some detail to the ground. And I'm usually doing them by creating the details in orthographic perspective, so I don't have to actually paint them manually. And then I'm using something like the free transform tool in Photoshop or warp, and you can adjust them according to your plane. I'm working on the foreground a little bit. I'm pushing the values a bit because I really want to have atmospheric perspective, and later on you will see me checking in black and white to see if everything works out, and I'm gonna push some planes a little bit further. So far we've been spending a little bit of time adding some details, different information for the focal area where the water is hitting the rocks. And it's especially tricky sometimes if you want to have like a clean look, especially for this type of scenario. You get accustomed to work with the smudge brush or maybe the mixer brush. Those brushes are really helpful. And right now I'm adjusting the values at the same time because I noticed that maybe the value groups that I'm using for the middle ground are a little bit too concentrated, like a bit too dark. So I'm just gonna push this push this plane a little bit further by just using a soft brush and adding a haze on top of the whole plane. Just a little bit. I don't want to kind of create a muddy feel, or I don't want to mess with the temperatures too much. So just a couple of brush strokes with some transparency to them. And I'm also trying to define the light as well, so you can see that I'm pushing sometimes those values, those planes that are facing the light source. I'm still experimenting with the color tones for those. I'm just gonna spend a little bit of time on the lighthouse, and this is the reference I used. It's nothing special, but it's I guess a good reference to sort of like describe this object. And you can see that I'm constantly looking at the image from afar, trying to get rid of the whole painting at the same time, instead of just focusing my attention on one area. And sometimes I'm turning the image black and white. You guys probably noticed that. I do it quite a lot just to monitor the values, make sure that my composition works, everything is readable. Sometimes I'm looking for more of a graphical look, right, when everything is kind of like separated quite well, and the values are unified, and it depends on what your goals are. And right now I'm also sort of like adding a bit of color to the whole thing, just because I didn't want it to be close to monochromatic. I'm working on describing the form, right? So we have core shadow, we have the bounce light coming from the sky in the right side, sort of like desaturated tone of the sky. And working on the surfaces, it's quite important, especially if you want to sell this feeling that those rocks are wet. I'll probably work on the materials a bit more and kind of find areas that are, by the logic, would kind of like reflect. Once they're covered with water, they should probably reflect the environment a bit more. Also, I'm thinking that I want to push the contrast with the light a bit more, just to create more accents here and there. And that's why you can see me working on those textures, adding like lighter materials, just to add a bit more variation, and constantly looking, maybe I can push the contrast a bit more in the focal area. So you can see me adding some lighter values on top of those waves. And also I think it would be cool to have like this reflection of the sunlight, of the source of the light, in those windows on top of the lighthouse. And as always, there is a free brush pack in the description with some of my most used brushes, and they work in Photoshop, Procreate, Paint Studio as well. And for those of you who want to learn even more, there is a Patreon page where I'm uploading monthly tutorials with full process videos, more commentary, original PSD files, and even more brushes. So don't forget to check that out. I also think that maybe there is a little bit too much noise in some areas of this painting, especially in the foreground. Don't think I should probably go for this type of look. That's why I will try to unify that area a bit more, like erase some of the contrast that we can see in the foreground. I'll probably remove it later on, just because I think it's additional contrast and it's not really needed. And I'm also pushing the background a bit further away. Those lonely rock over there in the right will lighten up the value overall. And I think if I will darken the sky a bit more, it will create like a nice contrast with those waves smashing those rocks in the middle ground around the focal area. And the same thing I was thinking about the ground on the right. I think it had too much noise, so I'll try to unify it somehow. Value wise, I'm also like thinking that maybe it's a little bit wet from the waves, hitting the plane, and I'll probably add a little bit more reflections. Just hinting. I wasn't looking for anything very realistic, but sort of like hinting that this is a plane that is kind of like reflecting a bit more, so creating some textural variation basically. And at this step, look around the image and remove unnecessary noise. Work on your planes, make sure that they're facing the light source and their value is adjusted. I'm still trying to push the contrast a bit more between the lighthouse and the sky, in the clouds, kind of like hinting maybe there is a storm coming. That's why these waves are kind of like so aggressively hitting those rocks. Alright, so this is the final image. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, it helps a lot. Also, if you have any questions about the process, don't forget to ask them in the comments below. I'm trying to answer all of them. And big thanks to those who subscribe to the Patreon. I hope to see you guys in the next video, coming soon.